So a lot of people will use for convenience sake, say the Pro Mixes, things like that, but it's a lot of times that's not feasible because you may have a problem getting rid of that product once it's been used. A lot of people want to go with organics, and then when you're trying to find a fertilizer that's completely organic, a lot of times it's not compatible with wetting agents, things like that are put in the premixed soils. So there are ways that you can build a living soil, and the advantages of a living soil are you can reuse it with adding some small amendments to it. It does have to cook, but that's usually a 2 to 4 week period. And once you've started building a base of this soil, adding your amendments, if you're just using some of the small ones, you really won't need to let it cook if you're doing it in small amendment additives at the end. But to build a basic soil mix, you're using peat, and ProMix sells an excellent peat that doesn't have any wetting agents in it. And then you're going to be doing humus. And the best humus is earthworm castings. You can use compost, but a lot of times compost will come with bugs because a lot of the compost that we get is kept outdoors. So that can become a problem later on. So the best thing to use is earthworm castings. They're a great humic additive and they'll work. So you would do a half a part of peat moss, a half a part of an aggregate, perlite works well, and then a half a part of your humic, which would be your earthworm castings, and then it would be a cup of lime. Now, to do that, to make a cubic foot of soil, which equates to 7.5 gallons, you would use a 5-gallon bucket. 1 full part would be a whole 5-gallon bucket. So for your peat moss, you'd get yourself a garbage can, and you would use a 5-gallon bucket of peat moss, a half of the 5-gallon bucket of earthworm castings, and a half of a 5-gallon bucket of perlite. Mix that all together into your garbage can or whatever bin you want to use. And that is sufficient to build a base soil. That's perfectly fine to use for seedlings and cuttings. I'm sorry, and you're also adding a cup of dolomite lime. And we're using dolomite. That's the best lime to use for that because it is for over the long period of time. And with a living soil, it is going to be viable down the road even after your first crop, second crop, third crop, you will still be able to reuse that soil with just a few additives, so you don't have to go out and buy all new soil all the time. So with that, that's fine for seedlings, cuttings, and then when you go to do it, you can add amendments. Now, we have amendments for nitrogen, we have amendments for your phosphorus and potassium, and we have amendments for your minerals. So your glacial rock dust, which is azomite, we carry the Spanish River carbon complex, which is excellent for use as a mineralization. But what you're going to add to this basic soil mix is you want 2 to 3 cups total of all amendments to be used in this mix. So it's not 1 or 2 cups of everything, but a total of 2 to 3 cups of all of your amendments to add. So what you can add as an amendment, you can look for canola meal, cottonseed meal, flax meal. Those are all excellent additives for your nitrogen. And when you use alfalfa meal also has trace minerals in it too. So, and they help feed beneficials. Kelp meal is another one. Kelp meal you're always using at double the ratio. So if you're using a cup of, say, flaxseed meal, use 2 cups of kelp meal in there because it will feed your beneficials and it will help with your nitrogen levels as well. But this, you get it mixed up, you can then put it into your pots, pot it up, let it sit for 2 to 4 weeks to cook. And that way all of these amendments, which are organic, will start to work in the soil, and then all you're having to feed your plant is water. All your nutrients are there. You're not having to use any kind of a chemical fertilizer, and you are not using pH down, things like that. It's just straight water. If you're in the city and you have chlorination, let your chlorine go out of your water. Either put a fish pump air stone in and let it bubble for 2 to 4 days, and that will dissipate all the chlorine while keeping the water nice and oxygenated so it doesn't become stale. But that's how to build a basic soil mix, and it does become a living soil. It's something that can be used on and on and on. And then when you go to reuse your soil, the amount of amendment you're going to add is only about a half a cup. And if you've mixed some of your amendments up, if you buy, your bags of your flaxseed meal, your alfalfa meal, feather meal is another one that works really well for your nitrogen contents. What you're going to do is, if you have extra, keep it in a Tupperware container. Then when you go to readjust your soil after your grow, add no more than a half a cup of your amendments to your soil, and then you don't have to let it cook. You can just do that, or you can top dress as well with some of your amendments, and then just water in, and it doesn't have to sit any longer. When you pull your plants out, after you've used your soil too, shake all the dirt off of them and throw the root balls into a container. Let them dry for a couple of days. Then you can take a shovel and you can actually chop it up, and you can mix that right back into the soilless mix as part, and it will help with water capacity, things like that, but it's actually putting back into your soil, because that's really what the good part of organic soil building is it's good stewardship of your soil, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So you're constantly building on that to make sure that all you really have to do then is water. You don't need to have a lot of additives. Now, if you have certain plants that are very heavy feeders with, say, a potassium or something like that, you can always, at the amendment addition stage, add a little bit more that would be good for them. Something that is used that works really well is langbonite. And langbonite or sulfomag, is sulfur, potassium, and magnesium. So that's a really good long-term breakdown, and that's what will happen with these organics too, is the longer they sit and you're using them, the more will be available to your plant as it breaks down over time. So it is an actual living soil. You don't want to use any hydrogen peroxide, you don't want to use any of those things in it, because it will kill the beneficials that are being produced in there. So that's basically how you build a basic soil, and you can use that for anything. Are there any questions for people? No? No questions?
Can you plant in soil that's already cooking?
That's cooking? No, wait until you've given it the 2 to 4 weeks before you plant in that, because what's going to happen is the nutrients won't be available to the plant yet. It takes that long for them to actually break down so that the plant can take them up and use them. So if you planted it, your mix might be hot as it's cooking. The same thing as you wouldn't go out and use a bag of cow manure and put that in right away. Something that works as well, that's excellent to add if you can find one that doesn't have too strong of a smell, is crab meal. And crab meal has a polysaccharide in it, which causes the crab to build all those little spiny things on its shell, the calcium and little parts that come out of it. When you use that, it causes all of your beneficials and microbes to exude what's called chitin. And what that does is it's very harmful to the exoskeletons of pests and eggs of bugs in the soil. It helps disrupt those. So that's another good additive to use. Plus, it's really high in calcium, it's high in nitrogen, and it's high in phosphorus as well. So it's an excellent additive to use. Just try and find one that's not quite so smelly, or you're going to smell like you've been, at Red Lobster or something for the day in your room. But that's an excellent additive to use, and it does help with bug control as well. So there's many different types of additives. Welcome Harvest carries quite an extensive line, and Homegrown carries the Welcome Harvest along with Gaia Green. They're glacial rock dust, and you can use rock dust if you live near a stone quarry or one of the places that produces granite countertops. You can go in and ask for granite stone dust. Really cheap, great amendment to your soil. So there's other things you can use, and go by what your budget will allow too, because you can always build over time and add to things with your additives, get more expensive additives as you want to build your soil up. But just remember, a 5-gallon pail is what you want to use for measuring in, and 1 5-gallon pail is 1 cubic foot of soil, or 7.5 gallons. So it just makes it really easy to measure. So a full half of a 5-gallon pail of peat, a half of earthworm castings, and half of perlite or an aggregate that's like that type of a thing for your aeration, and then a cup of dolomite lime, and that makes your basic soil recipe that you can use for anything. Put your additives in after that, and all you have to do is add your water. There is no fertilizer that you have to use after that. And your beneficials will help keep your pH stable as well. So no questions? Yes?
The perlite with your organic compound going on, would it be more beneficial to add something other than perlite, or is there anything that exists that can do that same job? Like, how about Aquasorb or something like that?
No, that's a polymer.
Okay.
Aquasorb is an actual polymer made from the petroleum industry. So that's not really an aggregate.
So the other one is, what is that?
Perlite is a mined product. Yes, well, it's a mineral product, but yes, it is the same with vermiculite. Vermiculite is a mined product as well. So, but vermiculite is not really there for aeration. That's all perlite is doing, is actually aerating, making it so it's not compacting down around your roots. Because if you've ever opened earthworm castings, they can be quite heavy and dense. So if you pack that with peat moss in around your plant roots, they couldn't breathe, and your beneficials wouldn't be able to react either. You can always use teas as well, whether it's from earthworm castings. Some of your guanos you have to be careful with, depending on the amount, especially in the vegetative stage with your nitrogen, if you're using earthworm castings, because they are quite high in nitrogen. And what earthworm castings also do is they help the plant keep the pH stable with the aerobic bacteria at the root level, so that they can uptake the nutrients that you're giving them. But earthworm castings, I would say, would make a better humate than compost, because then you're not introducing bugs, because most compost is either kept outside, or if you're getting it in bags with holes in it, you have a chance of getting the bugs. And once you get the bugs, it's so hard. And we've found, I'm not sure how many people here have had problems with root aphids. Root aphids have just cropped up like crazy in the past, I'd say past 6 months to a year. And a lot of them are coming from the organic materials that people are putting in as soil mixes too. So you just have to be careful, and look where you're getting some of your materials from. If it's from a store where they keep everything outside all the time, all it takes is somebody to move this bag and it catch on a pallet and make a little bit of a hole And then you've left yourself open to all kinds of outside influences too. But it's very easy to keep a garbage can full of the mix. Just add a little bit more all the time, and it doesn't take up too much room, especially if you're in a small confined space. But that is building all the time on your living soil, and then you're not having to worry about what am I going to do to get rid of this soil. If you have a yard and you're using it for fill outside, great, or filling your containers with, that's wonderful. But if you can't do that, then it becomes a problem trying to get rid of Promix, especially in January when you're hauling it out down an elevator or something like that. So a living soil has an advantage that way too, where you can just continuously use it over and over again with just a few amendments. Okay? All right? Okay.